Okay, I am going to go ahead and just get started while we let other people in. So welcome to today's Institute for Disability Research, Policy and Practice Early Intervention ECHO. We're really excited for our speakers today. Every time I move my thing, it hits a different button and then I can't advance my slides. So just to let you know, we are recording today's session. If you are on today's session, you will be recorded. ECHO is an interactive community and we talk about cases. So please remember to avoid any identifiable information as we're talking about anything. If you are unsure, please reach out to one of our hub members on that. We'd love to have active participation. So if you could turn on your cameras, it makes it easier for the speakers and presenters, as well as it just helps us learn who each other are. And if you'll also work on changing your name, if you are on a phone, if you would also make sure to put your name in chat so we can track that. You all probably know how to do all these things on Zoom, but you can raise your hand to ask questions, put those questions in the chat, and we'll work on monitoring those for our speakers today. Pre-registration is always the way to receive those materials, any announcements, so reach out to earlyecho@usu.edu. When at the end of today's session, we will send out a survey, so fill that out, and that's how you will get the certificate of attendance. We post everything on Canvas. If you have not received a Canvas invite, please email us and let us know, and we'll send you that Canvas invite. Please share, be thinking about if you have a case to share, so share your information. It's a way to hear from your colleagues about recommendations and get feedback to take back and apply to the cases that we're talking about. I'm going to be posting a poll here in just a moment that if you guys can answer those two questions at the beginning, and then I will also do one at the end. We do a survey. It may come through to your spam or junk mail, so please check those folders as well. We do have a Facebook page. If you're interested in following and learning about those, go ahead and follow us. And then I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I am going to turn the time over to Ann Larson and Christina Myers. They are going to be I am just so excited to hear what they are sharing with us today.
Great. Hi, everyone. Give me a second to share my screen. Okay, are you seeing Intro to Super? It's on the wrong slide, but we're at the right. Hold on. Shield your eyes. Okay. Title screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Great. Does everybody have a chance to reply to Janelle's poll there, and we'll get started. So Tina, I'm going to ask you to keep an eye on the chat for me as we begin, and then I'll swap as you take over. So welcome. We're so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having us. We're going to talk today, as you can read on the slide, about Tele-Practice as an opportunity to improve implementation of caregiver coaching in early intervention, and a topic that would have been interesting and maybe somewhat exciting a few years ago, and now maybe like, again, are we still talking about Tele-Practice? But here we are. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. And we're hoping to frame this as an opportunity and give you a little bit of insight into how we have started using Tele-Practice to support practitioner implementation of caregiver coaching. So my name is Dr. Ann Larson. I'm at the University of Minnesota. I'm here today with my colleague, Dr. Christina Myers from the University of Colorado Boulder. And our close colleague, Dr. Molly Romano at Florida State University was not able to join us today, but much of the content that you'll see on our slides and the study that we'll briefly describe was part of her brain and work as well. So also wanting to acknowledge Sue Olson, who is the director of Up to 3 in Utah, and then Hannah Eugenio, who is a recently graduated master's student in speech language pathology from Florida State University, who supported a lot of this work as well. So just to give you a brief agenda of what we're planning to cover in the next few minutes here is some background on why this topic is important. We'll go pretty speedy through that since I'm hoping you'll be able to, that'll all resonate with you. You've all lived this experience over the last year and a half, and then go into a description of how we try to support some practitioners in your region and in northern Utah on using caregiver coaching approaches through telepractice as we were all pushed to that model. And then last, we'll talk a little bit, give you some time to think about how you may implement some of these practices into your everyday work with children and families in EI. And certainly time for discussion at the end. Also, if please feel free, we're pretty informal presenters, so you are welcome to pop questions into the chat as you have them, and we will just kind of, if it seems like it's going to be a great time to address them, we will. If we're going to wait till the end, we will certainly come back to them, but don't hesitate to just pop things in as we go through. So as you know, just getting into content, we've had to quickly move from a face-to-face model that was primarily used in early intervention into a telepractice model that was certainly has been used in the past, but not by everyone. And so some of the research on this, we've focused on primarily on SLP. Research has been one that's been easy to identify. Prior to the spring of 2020, many SLPs reported struggling to hold toddlers' attention over video conferencing. Makes sense, right? Not real easy to hold a toddler's attention to be able to play games over a computer or a phone in some cases when they're looking at you at the other end. And many practitioners reported being unsure of how to talk to parents about implementing intervention strategies without being physically present there to work with the child and the family. On the same side of things, the practitioners, early intervention practitioners who had experience with coaching models in the past faced fewer obstacles to this shift from face-to-face to telepractice. So they had the skills that they could build on and use within a telepractice model. They weren't used to a one-on-one child only. They were already working in that triadic model of working with the caregiver and the child as a dyad, and they had fewer, though, you know, we all had obstacles to this switch, but fewer obstacles when they had that background in coaching prior to a switch to telepractice. Just make sure I get everything. So a couple of benefits too, as I mentioned at the beginning, I don't think this is going anywhere, right? We're going to see telepractice as part of our ongoing practice as we continue to enter, and hopefully more and more so, be with families in their home environment face-to-face. But the benefits of telepractice, I hope now will continue, you know, now that we've experienced it and we've gotten over the hurdle a little bit in accessing what that technology looks like, to be able to make our services more efficient, to be able to serve families in rural settings, to be able to have more contact time, less travel time, all of those things through a different platform, but hopefully the same types of quality of services. So telepractice and early intervention itself has an emerging evidence base. It's been tested in multiple studies. It's summarized as an effective service delivery approach through meta-analyses, for example, with toddlers who have autism, in reviews of children with hearing loss. And coaching-based telepractice model has been successful with families who have children with different types of disabilities and delays. Okay, so in fact, the interesting thing here, again, about telepractice and unique to our study, what our kind of hypothesis was with introducing this coaching approach, telepractice was demonstrated to increase the use of a caregiver coaching approach when used by practitioners through, let me start again. When practitioners used telepractice, they were more likely to use a caregiver coaching approach as they were to use in comparison to their use of a caregiver coaching approach in person. So what happened here is that this shift to telepractice really forced practitioners to also shift to this coaching approach. Many practitioners were able to learn, we all learned the technology, but some did not know how to coach caregivers. So that was the easy part, learning how to get onto Zoom, learning how to teach families how to get onto Zoom or whatever platform you were using, but learning how to coach takes longer. I mean, it takes practice, it takes reflection, and that's the part that we're gonna focus on today. So the purpose of our study was to, it was very much a just-in-time. We actually had been planning this for several months before the pandemic in a more rigorous kind of design of experimental design, but switched gears quickly and tried to provide this just-in-time training for the use of caregiver coaching practice and telepractice. So our control group went away, essentially. We were planning on trying this with a few practitioners, seeing how it went, and then poof, everybody was in the experiment. So it's the rigor of the study and the methods is not as high as we had hoped it would be, but we did find some really important and interesting data. And then so hopefully some really practical suggestions that you will all be able to walk away with today. So we had 18 practitioners with experience levels between 1 and 16 years in early intervention who participated in the study. They all went through 2 web-based trainings on SUPER, which is the framework I'll be describing in just a moment. And then we just tested their knowledge gained and their self-reported use of the strategies through 2 surveys, one before they had those web-based trainings and one after. So I'm going to dig into what was this model that we talked about, and we call it SUPER. It's both an acronym and a name in itself. We'll get to what the acronym stands for in a moment. Is there a question? Okay. So SUPER is made up of and based on 3 major principles. The SUPER model is an evidence-based way to use adult learning principles through early intervention to change family outcomes. And it does so with these 3 things. Family capacity building, so focusing on that relationship with caregivers, participatory practices, giving those caregivers the opportunity to try out strategies, to receive feedback on them, to reflect on them. It's family guided within routines, based within routines. So it's individualized for those children and families, their actual context. It's embedded within routines and activities that family typically engages in. It's focused on functional outcomes. And as I mentioned, evidence-based, it's been tested specifically in early intervention programs. So it's not something that was developed for another home visiting service and brought in. It's not something that was created for K-12. It was developed, designed, and has been tested in early intervention programs and gone through lots of iterations of development. And it's last, based on adult learning principles. And this is really the one where we see practitioners knowing the least about. It's not something that we're often trained on in our pre-service programs. We know a lot about helping families feel confident and teaching them skills, even sometimes embedding those things into the natural environment. But how that all works is really what SUPER and the research behind it has spent many years studying. So these 4 components listed in the first column of the table here make up the SUPER framework. And across the table, you can see how SUPER can be used within synchronous telepractice visits, so meaning at the same time, so through a video conference or over a phone call, how they could be used asynchronously, so with time in between the communication, maybe with texts or emails, recordings sent between a caregiver and a practitioner, and then certainly face-to-face. So to date, Super has only been tested in face-to-face models, but it's been trained on its use within telepractice models. So I guess this is the first study testing its use at some level in telepractice. So as I continue, I'm going to go through each of these sections, setting the stage, observations and opportunities to embed, problem solving and planning, and reflection and review. And then we'll come back to this table to try to give you some examples as we're going through about how this may vary depending on the intervention setting that you're using the strategies within. So that first group of strategies describes how practitioners can work on setting the stage for a telepractice visit or a face-to-face visit by gathering general updates about the family and then asking caregivers to share information related to the child's development, family's interests, and more specifically about how that intervention implementation is going. At the end of setting the stage, you get into clarifying session targets and strategies. So I'm going to go through the three, is it two or three? Three sections of this here. So first, setting the stage, practitioners may start with a general question about how everything went since the last visit. Families may have, often this is like a great way to find out if families might have other priorities that are happening on that day or in their lives more broadly that prevent them from focusing on what you came to do with them, right? Or what you're on the screen ready to support them with. So one frequent, unfortunate example that I would run into as a practitioner is, how's it going today? Walking into a family's home and they would share, we're going to be evicted on Friday. We need to find another place to live. Like, we are not going to be working on 2-word sentences today. We're going to be working on helping you find another place, right? So it's just knowing and understanding what all families are going through and giving them the opportunity to share that with you and ensure that this is still a good time for them, that this is still a priority. They're able to prioritize what you're there to support. I'll just point out that in telepractice visits, this first step of setting the stage can occur over the phone, could occur via a text or email. You know, often we're texting, does this time still work okay for you before we make the hour drive out to somebody? But also here you can certainly expand a little bit on that. How's it going? Everything's still good today. I'm planning to be there at 1. How's it going for your family? Then you move into more specific questions about how that child's behavior has changed, what the caregivers have been working on since your last visit. So how did it go when you had your child choose between 2 options this week? What did that look like for you? Whatever your agreed upon goal was from the previous session. And then as the family shares updates on those things, the providers can explain the connections between the intermediate goals the family is working on and how that will bridge to the next area of development. So sharing developmental information, building on what families know, and connecting that right back to the child outcomes. The last step in setting the stage then overlaps with a little bit as we get into planning, the PP section of Super. But here we suggest families develop a plan for an upcoming session. So planning is flexible, but you need to take the time to set the plan and what that's going to look like. What that will look like for your upcoming visit is what setting the stage helps with. And then as we get later into planning can be, what are we going to do next? So here in this last stage, you're identifying, so today, do you still want to work on this? Or it sounds like that's changed. If a family had questions about another area or something else that came up during the week, maybe you need to shift that priority for today's visit to be a little different than from what you planned during the previous visit. So just confirming all of those things, setting the stage really helps with that critical piece of relationship building as we go through a coaching interaction, develop a coaching interaction. The second group of strategies in SUPER describes how practitioners can use observation and opportunities to embed strategies through caregiver-child interactions within routines. And then this provides specific examples on how we can respond to caregivers as practitioners while those caregivers use naturalistic interventions. Providers use strength-based feedback on the caregiver and child behaviors within those interactions, and also look for opportunities for meaningful engagement. So they might conduct some of the following, like watching interactions between a parent-child dyad prior to coaching and providing feedback. They could incorporate both general, like great job, and specific feedback. I like how you held 2 items right up to your face before giving him a choice. That really is drawing the child's attention to your what you're offering them, something like that as a more specific feedback. And then to offer that contextual match between both the child and family's environment, the caregiver's behaviors, the outcome that you're looking for, and the strategy. So pulling it all together. Within observation and opportunities, the child and family through telepractice, that observation might occur either through something like we're doing today, through a video conference, through a smartphone application like FaceTime or Google Duo, or it can occur asynchronously as well. So GoReact and Flipgrid are some of the programs that I'm familiar, some of the apps I'm familiar with, where they compress video data. So it doesn't take up a lot of bandwidth for families, doesn't take up a lot of space on their phones. They can do a quick recording, send it to their practitioner, or vice versa. A practitioner can model something and then share that with a family. So there are lots of, we can talk more about some of the technological options, but just to give you some examples, that observation doesn't have to happen with you in the family's home necessarily. Following observation, then, the coaching strategies are used to scaffold caregivers' skill attainment and really try to build their competence and confidence in using those strategies. This is one of the most challenging sections of SUPER to adapt for telepractice, but it's still possible. So as a synchronous intervention strategy, coaching strategy, you're just there, you're watching, then you're providing some feedback. Like, I thought that went really well. I mean, you're maybe providing feedback while that caregiver is holding the phone and the baby at the same time, whatever the situation might be. But one nice thing, and I'll mention this, put in a little plug for another study that we're working on, but at the end, but we can also use asynchronous feedback here. So a family could send you a video, you can watch it back together. So you can have that video to share over as a screen share on something like Zoom, pause it. What did you notice about that? Or tell them what you noticed, and then follow up with how did you make that happen? Or what were you thinking about when you implemented that strategy? What was difficult about it? What was easy? So it's really nice to be able to use that video regardless, actually, if it's happening face-to-face or if it's happening over some type of technology. The last indicator here for observation and opportunity to practice, the coach provides both general, like I said, something like great job, or that was awesome, and specific feedback to the caregiver. So how did they do on using the strategies that they were practicing? Then you continue problem solving. So if it didn't go so well, what do you do? Or if it went really well and how do you want to plan for continuing to use this? Or what's the next step? So within this third set of strategies in SUPER, practitioners use problem solving and planning to identify strategies that caregivers can embed into their everyday activities and routines, and then describe how practitioners can support the caregiver in identifying those opportunities and using those strategies in other contexts. Here, the practitioner can problem solve with the caregiver about an appropriate intervention strategy to embed, mention and make sure we're obviously informing parents about, or other caregivers about, evidence-based interventions, and then trying to problem solve and brainstorm about where this might work best and why. So are there some situations where a particular intervention strategy might be better than others? To begin this problem solving process, coaches may provide suggestions for evidence-based interventions and then follow up with the family. So I might say something like, this is something that I think might work, something that I've tried in the past. Here's why it typically works. How do you feel about trying that? So it's that, how do you feel, or how does that compare to what you usually do? What's your comfort level with that? Those types of follow-up questions we don't always do. We sometimes jump in, okay, I know this kid needs to start having whatever major outcome it is. They need to start walking up the stairs. I'm going to get them to do that by using this strategy because I've seen it be super effective. And then you go in and you think, okay, I can do that by telling the caregiver exactly what to do. Great. But is that something that the caregiver is actually going to do? Is it something that they know how to do? Is it something they've already tried and felt like they failed at doing? So that follow-up part is really what we're getting at with problem solving and planning. How do you have a conversation about those evidence-based strategies and determine what really is going to be helpful for that caregiver and that child, and within particular situations and their interactions? Once a strategy is selected, here we get into supporting the caregiver to identify a routine or activity that they've used that strategy in. So the caregiver answers questions like, why is this strategy important? How do I think it will work in the routine? Who else needs to be present in order for this to be successful? What materials might I need? So you're actually going through and scaffolding that caregiver's planning of this, not you necessarily coming in and saying, I think you should try it during mealtime. But thinking about what's a good time, what feels like a reasonable time for you to implement this strategy once you've had an agreement on, yeah, that seems like something I'd be willing to try and interested in trying. Seems like it would help what I want my child to continue growing in. And then thinking critically about why. If the caregiver comes up with, oh, I really want to try that during mealtime, you might have some tips about why that might not be the best time. And that's great to share too. So it's not that we're completely passing over every, part of our job and our training to the caregiver. Certainly not. But making their voice heard here and making sure that once we leave, once we turn off, our face is no longer on the computer screen, that's actually going to be happening, that it feels like a good plan for them, it feels doable, and that you've done what you can do to hopefully make that plan as successful as possible. So talking through, why might bath time be a little more challenging for this strategy? Or why might it not be so great to talk about choices during mealtime when your child is super hungry? And maybe we just need to focus on meeting that need first, and then talking about something else, or using that strategy at a time when they have more concentration or more control. And the last set of strategies, reflection and review. Practitioners ask questions and provide comments to promote caregiver reflection of a routine or a session. Here, the practitioners identify what works for caregivers and the child by encouraging those caregivers to describe what strategies look like when they're going well. And then they also help caregivers identify specific measurable outcomes. So you can think of this as summative. What went well that you want to keep using? Some tips here is asking one reflective question at a time, being okay with silence while waiting for that person to think about their response, and then recognizing that a reflective question always comes before feedback. So we want to understand where the caregiver is at, what they thought about how things went before we jump in as the professional and use some of that informative feedback. So here you can encourage caregivers to describe what it looks like when it's working well. This helps you understand where their expectations are, and it also helps come up with really specific measurable targets, things that you can start measuring on a week by week or a month by month basis that are a little more narrowed down from what those IFSP outcomes look like. And it gets that parent or other caregiver really involved in the data part. how do you see this change, which can be really empowering. The last section of reflect and review and the final slide for the description of the super components is based just on that, empowering families to determine the plan that works best for them and helping them be the decision maker. Where I think this is absolutely most exciting is when you've gone through a plan, it works, the caregivers have seen it work because they knew what outcomes they were looking for. And then you can put that all back onto them. Like, you made that happen. This was all you. And it's great to just be able to move on to the next set of strategies, then empower that family, increase their confidence, their competence. Here is this I didn't grab before we started. Sorry, we had a couple technical issues before we started. So I'm going to pull this up. I think, Tina, why don't you start and I'll pull this up as you're going through the results of after we taught practitioners these strategies. What findings did we see? What were people already using, and what did they start using after the training? Does that sound okay?
I can do that, or I think I'm sharing the video right now.
Oh, lovely.
Can you see?
Here. Yes. Bam.
Okay.
Teamwork.
Great.
Go
Here
for
we
it.
go. So I'm sorry, I think you already said this, but this is what we showed participants during the survey. And so they were reflecting on how much their sessions looked like this. And so many of the super components are demonstrated here.
Can you hear me okay? Yep, perfect. So if at any time you can't hear me, let me know, because I can repeat myself as often or whenever I'm needed. So how are you guys doing during the pandemic and all the routines and everything getting kind of turned upside down?
Our routines are definitely off. They kind of just do their own thing, and I just have to keep them separated from fight. That's the favorite thing right now is fight.
Oh, when you have a house full of boys too, that probably doesn't help matters, huh?
But I think that with B being home, which is Benny, his oldest brother, it's kind of helping Grayson more because they crawl and race, and then Bubba has him walking, and the stairs that Dad taught him because he likes to go up and down them now. But Dad had to teach him down because he was going up them and we were scared he was going to fall down. Get down, buddy.
In a little bit.
Come here, Grayson. I know, it's just so hard.
It is hard. I know. Well, that's awesome. And I love the videos that you sent me because you were showing me how he was walking and moving with his brothers. So that is an awesome way. And I love seeing those, to see the progress and yeah, just like you said, how they're challenging him and having him. So like when we texted, that's one of the things that we can kind of try to do today. I know you talked about him playing games with his brothers, but also doing the stairs. So
oh yeah, he's up home now. I was actually going to move the computer. Okay. Yeah, he's going up home now.
Cool. Then I'm going to see how you guys have been doing everything. Okay. All of this helps him with his walking.
I don't know if you can see him.
Oh,
Is you going?
Raise it up just a little bit. Yep, there he goes. Look at him go. Oh, raise it up a little bit more. I can see him go. Oh my gosh.
Did you do it? Yeah, you did.
That was awesome. So what kinds of things did you have to do to help him learn that?
He did that himself.
Did he?
Are we going to come back down? Now the down part we helped him with.
Okay.
But he followed Bubba's up the stairs, so he figured it out on his own.
When the brothers go upstairs to play, he's got to get there too, right? So how did you help him?
Back down him?
I can.
Come on.
So how did you help him with the coming down?
Huh?
What was the biggest thing that helped him with the coming down?
I showed him one time, and that was about it.
Was it really?
Yeah. Hi.
Look at how easy he pulls himself up. And then he turns to you when he talks. I love it. He's like, okay, look at me.
He got down too.
Up the hill again.
The only thing is once he gets on the stairs, we can't get him off.
Okay, so hopefully you noticed a few of the super strategies being used there. Certainly the setting the stage at the beginning. She had the opportunity to observe what was happening. She started getting into that problem solving and the RR at the very end, like, what did you do to make that happen? How did you help him learn to come back down? I think the practitioner there, oh, like the parent says, he just learned that by himself. And they said, oh, did he? Like, I'm pretty sure you may have something to do with that, or you learned that from his brother. So pulling that back and having this full system, that what that whole family is doing, to really take into consideration here. So I'll share again, Tina, and then you can get into our results.
Great. All right. Well, in addition to asking the practitioners to compare their own practice to that video, we had participants self-report their use of each of the 12 components of super in their telepractice visits, both before the training and after the training through the survey. They were provided with this list of all the components and asked to indicate if they typically applied each strategy during their sessions. Go next. So we saw that most practitioners reported using a lot of the super components prior to the training. That's highlighted there in yellow. So those 10 components were used by at least 60% of the respondents in the pre-training survey, with that first one, gather updates on child and family, being reported by 93% of providers. We also saw some nice increases in the use of several components after the training. So this will be highlighted in, let's see, I think it comes blue. There we go. So we saw that practitioners elicited more caregiver involvement by asking about the target intervention. They engaged in problem solving with the caregiver on the use of strategies and specifying measurable outcomes for change. So the reported use of many of the other components stayed about the same from pre-training, from the pre-training survey to the post-training survey, but some did increase. And then in some cases, the self-reported use of super components actually went down from the pre to post survey. This was especially noticeable for that the middle component there, number 9, item 9, that says supporting the caregiver in using interventions within everyday activities and routines. This decreased from 73% pre-training to 45% post-training. We think that this drop in the reported use of some of the super components may have occurred as practitioners learned more about the approach and realized that maybe they weren't using it with as high fidelity as they had thought that they were before they received the training. So there we go. Yeah, so in addition to those specific responses to the use of those components, we saw some of the most interesting changes in our qualitative data when practitioners responded to open-ended survey questions. There were 3 major themes to the practitioners' comments that emerged when we analyzed them, and we've listed some of those sample comments here to illustrate the themes. The first theme was practitioners liked having structure to their visit. And so, for example, one of them commented, "I'm more aware of what I want to accomplish and have a good schedule." We also saw that in the middle column, practitioners highlighted their use of specific coaching strategies. They were commenting on exactly what they were doing that was different based on their experience with the training. And those comments fell into each of the 4 major categories of components for super. So for example, that I've been asking parents to show me an interaction before I coach, which is related to the observation and opportunities to embed. They also reported increasing caregiver involvement in telepractice sessions, which was illustrated by comments like, "I allow the parent to take the lead more in our discussions." So that was our third theme. Some practitioners even reported expanding their use of the super strategies for use in mentoring relationships, saying things like, "As I supervise a clinical fellow, I look for and give feedback based on their use of the components of super." So that's just some of the results from our study that we wanted to share with you. And now we're going to move on to a little bit of time to plan for our implementation of these strategies in our own practice.
So here we should have some basic suggestions. Keep in mind that the information that we just presented, we did over 2 half days of training. So, and it's typically when you're actually, the actual super training typically occurs over 2 full days or 4 half days of virtual training. So two full days of face-to-face or 4 of half day. And then it has this embedded component of coaching the coach. So there's this ongoing professional development. So we don't necessarily expect you to be able to obviously pick up on all these components, nor did we really expect that for our survey. But a couple of suggestions that we've found to be useful when people are starting a caregiver approach like this, or are looking for ways to improve their caregiver coaching practice. One thing, if this is kind of new to you, if it's not something that you've done a lot before, or you maybe are in that group of practitioners who thought you were kind of doing it, but maybe now you're not sure if you're doing it to the level of fidelity that it could be, write down an elevator speech. So a quick description, something that could be delivered in the time it takes for you to get in an elevator with someone that you don't know and up to the floor that you're getting off on, and practice with a peer. So describe, what does this caregiver coaching approach look like? How do you expect families to participate? What's your role? And I would recommend, if you haven't done this before, which I'm pretty sure most of you have by now, if not prior to the pandemics, probably during, try it with a new family first. So don't assume that you're going to be able to do this with all the families across your caseload, but pick one to start with and see how it goes. You can review the implementation fidelity checklist for Super, which is here on the right side of your screen. Select one of those major components to focus on. So either SSOO, PP, or RR, or even just one strategy within that major component section. And then as we're talking about technology, something that's been really useful for me and for other practitioners, and is actually a part of the training to fidelity for the Super approach when it's been trained on in the past, is to have recordings. So you can either record yourself, super easy to do over Zoom, if families are willing. Do your own self-reflection. How did you do? Can you fill out your fidelity checklist here? What steps were you able to fit in? What did you miss? How might you be able to improve on what you included, or how might you be able to include more the next time? Or if you're really brave, ask a peer to check it out for you. Have a learning experience, a learning community about your use of the strategies. We know that this type of training, informational, it's fantastic to get things out there, but to really embed something new into your practice, into your everyday use with children and families, you need to have that ongoing support and feedback, just like what we're trying to provide for children and families themselves. So thank you so very much for listening to us talk at you very quickly about Super and some of our findings that we found. Open it up for questions here. And then I'm also going to give you my quick plug at the end for a little survey link. If you have any caregivers who you think would be interested in providing some feedback on how to use this approach with Spanish-speaking families, as we're developing an intervention for them as well. So I'll open it up for questions first, and then I'll give you that link at the end if that's okay.
Oh, and I'm just double checking the chat to see if I see anything. I so far haven't. Anybody have any questions for our wonderful presenters?
Curious to know how you think your programs would be, or you yourself might have come out on these. Are you doing all of them? Are there some, the measurement one was one that this number 11 here is one that many practitioners in our survey were kind of missing. Maybe just pop in the chat, curious which one or ones are you not yet doing? Or do you think your program might need more focus on? Just kind of curious.
And we had a question in the chat about the apps to send videos, and I'm more familiar with Flipgrid, which I do think is free. Do you want to talk about Go React?
Yeah, so I mentioned Go React because it's a Utah product, so I know it's more accessible in some programs in your region. It unfortunately, so I was in Utah the last 4 years and had planned to use that. We use it, it's being used at Utah State in our training programs. It's not so much used outside of that area, unfortunately, but Flipgrid is another one, and Go React is not free unless your organization pays for it. Flipgrid is a Microsoft product, and that is free. A lot of families are familiar with that during online schooling. It's used a lot in classroom-based instruction, but it's a pretty easy to download app, sign in with an email address, and then you can share back and forth comments essentially. So a family can upload a video that they record off of their phone, but it doesn't have to take up space on their phone's memory, and it doesn't take, it won't get stuck in somewhere in between the wires and air being sent through something like a text. So it's a lot easier to view. It won't be all garbled if it comes through as a text. It's a high quality video platform to be able to send and view videos.
And there was also,
sorry, go ahead, Janelle. I was just responding to this, that it's great information and reminders of how to structure structure visits. And I was replying that we did have a lot of respondents comment on how helpful it was to have like this checklist for the structure and just to revisit, you know, a lot of the things that they had been doing, but to put them into these categories and think about how they were related to those components.
Yeah,
so this was a major theme.
A major finding, yeah, from the qualitative data, which was really interesting. Just, I'm doing a lot of these things, but I maybe didn't have a framework for how they all fit together. And that can even be really useful.
And then we have a question about, is the slideshow available, and that you would like to use the planning chart for implementation as a reflection tool. That's great. So this is available. And so we'll make sure that we get it to you. It's also available online. I think it's at the FDRBI or
State University has it. Yes, but we can go ahead and send the public manual for Super. So you have, you know, a more detailed description of what all of these components are. And the checklist is in there. And then, yeah, I don't think there's any reason why we can't share the presentation too. So we can do that as well.
so and if you will just share that with me via email,
Absolutely.
then I will share that with everybody, and it will also be on our Canvas. And then it looks like Summer has her hand up.
I do. I'm excited to see and hear from you. I was wondering if you had some suggestions for, as practitioners, how to plan in and support that self-reflection and peer review. Like at what time after a visit, or how should they plan for that?
Great suggestion. So for learning the strategies themselves as a practitioner, right? Yeah. So thanks, Summer. It's so great to see you. So what we recommend in terms of reflection review, and this is the part where people who've been in the coaching literature for a long time, who are not as interested in technology, are like, that's not going to work because your feedback needs to be immediate. That's the most effective way. So that's really what we try to carry through, is like, give yourself your feedback as soon as you can after the action has been completed. So after you've had a home visit, if you can send something off after you've recorded a Zoom video conference, put it in an email, get the link out to your peer, or better, even both. If you're going to use a peer to get some feedback for you, also reflect on it yourself. So take some notes. Several practitioners that I've worked with, and myself included, after a visit, we would have a, I'm dating myself a little bit, but a laminated sheet of the indicators. So having it in your car. And so you would just go through after a visit, use a whiteboard marker and check off. What did I do this time? What did I miss? If you're really a data junkie, you can plug it into an Excel form and see if you're consistently missing one of the indicators, but you'll probably be able to figure out, more informally, which ones are more challenging for you. And then to be able to look back at at the further description of those to try to implement them with fidelity or look for more clues, maybe then going to that next level. So I would recommend starting with self-reflection. I think it can be a little, certainly as we're all overwhelmed with the world, giving someone who's going to provide you with some feedback, something a little more specific, is really helpful too. So if you do the checklist after your visit and you're noticing after a few visits that you're really not doing problem solving and planning to the level that you'd like, maybe have somebody watch through and help you identify opportunities for where you might embed that piece into your structure of your visit, or where those opportunities are. But yeah, the long answer, but feedback as soon as possible. Start with self-reflection because it's probably easiest and least intimidating, and then make it fun, don't start with your supervisor, start with your friend, something like that, or have it be a community where you're all sharing and you're all like, okay, I'm going to listen to myself. I got to look at myself on camera. You're all in the same boat and you're all doing it because you want to become better clinicians.
Thank you, Anne, for that answer.
Absolutely. Anything else? Well, thank you all so much. I'm going to pop this up. So this is recruitment for an intervention that we're developing over 4 years. So using these same sorts of caregiver coaching strategies through an asynchronous format, and specifically for Spanish-speaking families who have Latino heritage. So if you're working with any Spanish-speaking families who have children in EI right now, who are in EI because of the communication delay, can be other things as well. If you would please share this little bit.ly link with them. We only need 5, we need 15 total families. And I've been recruiting for a month and a half, almost 2 months now. And I can't get past the supervisor because nobody wants to, put anything else on our practitioners, which I completely understand. And nobody else wants to do anything for caregivers. But this is the link to see if caregivers are eligible to participate. And then, or they can also reach out to us on our Instagram page or at our email here. And I would also love to hear from you. So I think I put my contact information on the bottom of this slide. Lars, I'll put it in the chat. Would love to hear from any and all of you. And then we'll get those supply materials to Janelle. And I'll put this one in the chat as well. If you have some Spanish-speaking practitioners who you think would be willing to share their experience with us, we really want to make sure that more diverse voices are brought into this practice. So we would love your help. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you so much, you guys. That was just great, useful information. I am going to turn the time over to Becky Fletcher from DDI Vantage, who is going to share our case presentation today. And Anne and Christina, I don't know if you guys were able to stay on, or if I know Anne, you had mentioned you might have a meeting.
I do have one coming up, but I'm going to stay on for a little bit, as long as I can. Okay. Thank you.
Great.
I'm gonna share my thing. I also like to sing when I get nervous. Sorry, people. At least I can carry a tune though. So, recently I got a new kid, and the kid is tricky. And so I'm hoping to learn different ways, and not only we're lucky right now. With masks and such, that we're able to interact with the family in person. But my big fear is, what do I do when I can't interact with them at all and I have to do it virtually? So he is a 20-month-old boy. He has no diagnosis, healthy pregnancy, good prenatal care. He's a second child. Spontaneous birth, no issues there. He walked at 13 months, pretty normal, crawled first. We used the BDI in Utah, and his only score was a severe receptive and expressive delay. In my first couple of visits that I've had with the family, he doesn't answer his name. He doesn't follow directions with gestures. He doesn't look for objects when you ask for them. He rarely babbles. And at this point, he doesn't really have any words. He does do turn taking to imitate his mom's sounds, and he usually whines to get his needs met. He's really attached to his mom, and that's the only person he seems to be aware of. In fact, one day I was doing a visit and the dog was running around in the house, and the dog was barreling straight at him and he didn't even flinch, and the dog went around him. But he really isn't aware of anything visually or that's in his area. But he doesn't seem to have any vision issues. Special educator has been in there since June 1st. I started in August. Initially, when I talked to the mom, I used the sensational brain sensory checklist, and he came out with no issues, no obvious sensory issues. When I'm working with him, he seems to like a lot of deep pressure, and he one time he really loved hiding inside a piece of furniture and staring at a nightlight. His older brother had sensory issues, but they're the complete opposite. This kid eats everything. The older brother didn't like eating things, you know. But for the most part, on paper, the kid looks normal. And then you watch him and you're like, no, but like, I'm not quite sure if it's primarily sensory or what is going on. Family's main area of concern is his communication and him not engaging with others. They wonder if he has autism. Autism testing right now is a little delayed here in Utah. It takes a little while. Some of it's done virtually, and a lot of times when it's done virtually, they don't give you a conclusive answer, and they want to try to do it when you can do it in person. And right now, the kids don't really share toys. No, I know toddlers don't share toys. The older brother will actually come over and actually take a toy out of his hand, and the younger brother will have absolutely no reaction. Doesn't faze him, and he just simply goes on and grabs something else. While the other brother then is like, woo-hoo-hoo, and takes the other toy and goes and plays with it. But he really isn't fazed by much of anything. The goals that we had written at the IFSP time was making more eye contact, trying to get him to answer to his name, increasing his time when he played with one toy, and trying to get him to use signs and gestures and words or anything form of communication, so that the family won't be frustrated that they're just playing the guessing game on what does he want. From my perspective, I'm not sure how to enter his world. He's not motivated by bubbles when I've been there. He doesn't like funny sounds. He does rough and tumble play a little bit. He likes books, but if you take the book away from him, he doesn't care. I can crash his car and he doesn't care. I can knock down his blocks and he doesn't care. Like, some of my normal go-to of interjecting myself into his world comes out flat. Like, one of the times I literally blocked his access. I was like laying like this, blocking him from the stairs. He didn't look at me. He didn't even acknowledge me. He treated me like an object, and he eventually climbed over me. He didn't ask for help from mom. It was really interesting. It's the first time I've ever, I joke around that I'm a human jungle gym, but I really became one. And a lot of times his napping has been inconsistent the day that I come, and half the time he's been asleep or waking up and then super drowsy type thing. The special educator has been in there. She said that she's had the most success by letting him warm up to the fact that she's in the room. And then he'll just do something repetitive, and she can then start doing that same repetitive thing. And that, but he's not making any eye contact. He doesn't imitate her, but he's okay with her imitating him. He's very attached to a blanket, and he'll sometimes do, like, you can do peekaboo with him with that blanket, but he's not necessarily making a lot of eye contact. But laying down on the floor on the blanket, he will look at her. And so, yeah, we're both like, Mom talks about some of the strategies that the special educator has given, that he's now actually engaging and interacting with grandparents and different things like that. I would love to know. Right now, I'm struggling with doing in-person visits on how to connect to the child and have the mom connect to the child. If we have to do virtuals, how do I coach the mom to engage with the child when I'm not even sure how to engage with the child? And is there some other way of assessing and figuring out how to work best with a child? That's complicated.
This is Rebecca, and I'm also an OT doing early intervention. I guess a couple of questions I would have would be, has he had any hearing loss ruled out?
No, but we can go check now that we're semi out of COVID. We can actually do more hearing checks, and we have the Utah School of the Deaf and the Blind that actually have a mobile unit that comes out to Tooele County. Because I'm in the semi-rural area of Utah with access to Salt Lake, but it's a half an hour to 45-minute, 10-hour drive depending. So we can get an audio booth check for him on his hearing.
I would want to rule that out just to make sure that isn't a component of what's going on, because even if he does have autism spectrum disorder, hearing loss can sometimes accompany that.
Okay.
So, and then the other thing I was going to ask you is, have you done the MChat with him?
We did the MChat, and he came up with several. Actually, I'll have to look that up. Let me stop sharing my screen. And let me see, pull it up in our system of what, because I know we did it, but what was his score on it?
Because I think that would give you some ideas as far as what's going on with that social communication, the joint attention. Is he pointing at things to get a parent's attention? Is he looking when they point at things? If that's not there by 20 months, then that's a pretty big red flag.
Yeah, he doesn't point to things. He doesn't look where mom is looking. I imagine the challenge is that sometimes when you do the MChat, because it's parent reported, sometimes they tell you all kinds of fun stuff, and then you find out later on that their interpretation of how well their kid is doing is not really how well the kid is doing. And I don't know where to find our MChat information, but I imagine, I know that when I asked mom all about his sensory needs, she's like, oh yeah, he's fine. Oh yeah, he's fine. Yeah, he never does that. He never stares at lights. He never, And then when I watched him, I'm like, he's totally staring at the nightlight. He's totally, but he doesn't have obvious sensory issues that I'm just like, oh yeah, look, there he is crashing into the wall. There he wants deep pressure, and there he is not refusing to touch something because he's tactile defensive. Some of those clear cut, easy, oh yeah, it's obviously sensory because he does X, Y, and Z. So
yeah. Sherry asking one other question as well, and then we'll move into breakout groups.
Hi, this is Sherman. So I'm curious, does this child have any, is he into like certain programs or videos where he interacts kind of with what they do on TV?
He doesn't watch TV. The
Nothing.
TV will be on and he'll glance up and he'll look at the TV and then he'll go do what is his own little world.
So it's kind of, okay. I was hoping that
So-
maybe he did. That way, maybe if it was something like that, you could incorporate into the session. I know I have a son with autism. When he was little, he was obsessed with certain things. So new people coming in would just kind of come in when he was doing that thing that he enjoyed so much. But a lot of times, like you said, it was just background noise for him to have in his ear.
Yeah, his other brother will be like, whoa, people up there, blah, 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 and then
Yeah.
start imitating what, you know, and imitating what the cartoon people are, and he has a favorite Mickey Mouse and whatever else. No,
But
no
is there?
favorite.
But he doesn't have anything. Mom doesn't report that he has anything like that he uses for comfort.
Other than the
On the
blanket,
usual.
nothing visual. He carries around his blanket. And one time he was starting to fall asleep, and he didn't even look to see who he was falling asleep on, and he fell asleep on me,
Aw.
thinking that I was his mom, because he didn't even like look up and recognize or look at the clothes and realize
Hmm.
mom was not wearing the same clothes I was wearing.
Aw.
When he is with mom, she will play alongside him. She will offer him toys. He won't even look at, like half the time he doesn't even look on what she's handing him. He will go and climb and sit on her lap, and cuddle with her, especially when the times that he's like either waking up or falling asleep on me, because he likes to do that when I'm having my visits of taking naps.
He medicated?
He's not on any medication.
Has he had
But-
his, I'm just curious to see, has he had vision checked as well as hearing? I mean, he hasn't had hearing checked. Has he had vision checked?
When we do an evaluation in person, we check their hearing with an OAE, and we do a visual assessment, but his was a virtual one, so that was a little tricky. I've wondered about his vision, but the SI who's in there used to work for the Utah School of the Blind, and we wonder, and we've talked about it, but we don't see any of the things that she saw when she was working for him. But I have my favorite, because we all have favorites. I have a favorite vision specialist that I can totally drop in a referral, and she'd be there like next week or whatever, and come in, and is it CVI? Like something along that, because I'm like, there's no reaction time. You know, but he has no problem going up and down the stairs and stepping over different, from the rug to the floor. He doesn't have any classic vision problems.
Okay, but he might have some pieces missing.
Maybe.
And, or, you know, he may have just limited vision and then be able to be really, really cognitive of what's going on with the touchy-feely stuff. And he's saying, okay, I'm on a different texture. I know where I'm coming. You know, he's memorized it going down, but has enough vision to get by.
And
So I don't know. I just think, just curious, because it sounds like, you know, he's bumping into things. It may not be sensory. It may be vision.
Well, I don't see him
I'm just-
bump into things. He'll actually walk around tight spaces and stuff like that. If objects are coming at him, he does, you know, usually like if I'm throwing a ball at you, you're going to be like, oh, there's a ball coming. And there's none of that type of reaction of something's coming at me. So I will totally have, in our program, we have a nurse put in a referral for vision to come out and see if there's some obscure thing that a fabulous vision person can catch that I don't have those skills for.
Just brainstorming.
Yeah, I love to go in and rule things out. I like to tell my parents that I'm Chicken Little and that I'm like, oh, the sky is falling. Let's make sure everything everything's okay. And then they're like, yeah, Becky, no, there is no problem. I'm like, good, I told you they weren't going to find anything, but I just wanted to make sure. So I have no problem being like, oh yeah, let's check his hearing and let's check his vision and blah, 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 blah. So awesome.
Okay, so we're going to go into breakout rooms and we're going to answer and brainstorm some ideas about ways to do virtual visits, different ways to engage with the child, and other ways to learn about sensory needs. So in 1 minute, you will get a thing to join a breakout group, and we will be in there for about 15 minutes. Anne, are you going to stay on and I can put you in a breakout room?
Sorry. Yes, I can jump in one for a little bit. I have another meeting starting at 2:30 or 1:30 Mountain.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna head out to prep for my 1:30, but thank you so much.
Thank
See you,
you.
Tina. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Welcome back. Pat, who did you have take notes in your group? Okay, if you'll just send them to me, then I will get those back out and they will be shared on the Canvas site. Welcome back, everybody. So we do not have enough time to review through all the groups today. All the breakout rooms, if you will email your list of recommendations to either myself or to the early echo at usu.edu, I will compile those. They will be on the Canvas site, and then Becky, we will send those back out to you after we get those all. Just a reminder that our next session is going to be in November, and it will be talking about ways to promote self-resiliency within providers. We have an amazing national presenter from DEC that is going to be talking to us about ways to avoid burnout. So please join us in November for that. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.